Thank you all for joining me for April's manga wrap-up. The first thing I read this month, as you will see coming up on your screen now, is Junji Ito's variation of Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human. Now, given that I do have two iterations of the same story, albeit I don't have the original novel, I thought it'd be prudent to read them both back to back, so kind of deviate from my planned TBR, so to speak. So, firstly, I ended up actually reading Osamu Furia's version of No Longer Human. It's a 3-volume series here from Vertical. Unfortunately, this is long out of print, so I was very lucky to pick these up. Actually, there's the cover of volume 1 there. So I read this one first. And it essentially follows the life of this guy on the cover here, Yozo Oba. And he's somewhat of a bit of a joker, a class clown, so to speak, but it's all a mask. He seems to have some kind of deeply rooted trauma brought on by a lot of various circumstances surrounding his family, namely his father and a couple of other relatives. So he's got this deep set melancholy and severe depression and nihilistic view of the world, and doesn't really understand people, how to interact with them, and you know what people's motives are, and what his place is in society and what society is as a whole. And he just kind of, it's just this real introspective look at him throughout his life, because he's albeit he plays this sort of class clown, he's also really intelligent. He's very academically astute, and he constantly tries to downplay that just to kind of fit in. So it really is just following him throughout his whole life, as he essentially tries to be a people pleaser more often than not, to his own detriment, and using his charisma and his good looks to seduce women and get what he want, get things that he wants, whether that be a place to live or money to feed his addictions, because that's another thing as well. He's a severe alcoholic and drug addict, and it's just this really, I mean, it's not a fun read by any stretch. It's just this really depressing, real look at the sad life of not only this character Yozo Oba, but also Osamu Dazai, as this is supposed to be semi-autobiographical. Like I said, I haven't read the original novel, so I can't really compare it to the original, though it does contain excerpts between chapters from the novel, so you kind of get an idea as to the writing style of Osamu Dazai, the original novelist, in these little chapter breakers. But overall, I did enjoy it. It does deviate somewhat from what I'm aware the original setting is, as it places this setting in modern times. So it's in that respect, it feels a little bit more relatable, in contrast to Junji Ito's variation, which is much more. It's in terms of its setting, it's much more faithful to the original novel. Again, from what I understand, as it's more of a period piece set in between World War. Set in pre-World War II and then a little bit in post-World War II. So, yeah, and it really follows the same sort of story. But these two series are very different from each other. Not necessarily in tone, but in style and aesthetic. If you're aware of Junji Ito, as many of my watchers will already be, let me try to give you some kind of example of some of his artwork. I think Junji Ito does a much better version at demonstrating this spiral into madness for, you know, in terms of the main character Yozo Oba. This, for me, out of all of Junji Ito's works that I've read, was his most ambitious in terms of the scope and range of character expression and emotional output. Commonly with Junji Ito's works, as many of you will be aware, he suffers with that same face syndrome, which I think from Junji Ito's perspective is somewhat intentional. He likes using the same sort of faces and characters, similarly to like Osamu Tezuka's kind of caste system in his manga. Anyway, that's another subject. In this, his characters' faces and expressions have a lot more emotional range and kind of deviate from that more grotesque, you know, kind of campy horror movie sort of style to a more realistic rendition of true terror. And, you know, because it's all introspective, it's all in the main character's mind. The way it's portrayed a lot better through Junji Ito's use of drawing characters in, you know, certain body positions and facial expressions and things like that. Because this isn't necessarily about physical horror, it's psychological horror. I think Junji Ito paid special attention to that rather than you know, using his more kind of campy, outlandish horror style, which I really, really appreciated. And overall, I did prefer Ito's version a lot better, namely because it's framed a lot better, and the dialogue, and perhaps it's probably testament to the translation as well. It's a lot more poetic and colourful in its use of language. Now, this was translated by, let me see, translation and adaptation by Jocelyn Allen. That's a name I've heard a couple of times, and she does a really, really good job at translating this. I thought her use of just the vocabulary that the character uses, as opposed to the Osamu Furuya version, which is just a lot more simpler. It's not necessarily bad, it's just simple in its choice of dialogue. And it doesn't really have much other than the character, the chapter breaks that show some of the original text from the novel. It doesn't really use a lot of colourful language and metaphorical description. It's very much a by the books kind of. Here's what's happening. He's depressed. You know, he wants to kill himself. He wants to do this. It's just very by the books and very literal. Whereas this is a lot more metaphorical and lends itself a lot better to the psychological state of the main character. Is you know, he questions a lot, you know, what is fiction and what, you know, what's am I hallucinating or is this reality? And there's a couple of scenes in this that you're not really sure actually happened or whether it actually played out in the character's mind, and I really like that because it essentially is just a spiral into horror. I guess it's nothing to do with Uzumaki, but it really is just this hopeless tale of Yozo Oba's descent into madness, and I think it's done a lot better in this than it was done in Furuya's version. And maybe this was a victim of its own hype, because, you know, this is something that I've heard of for years, and how great it is, and how, I mean, it isn't bad. It does certain things better than Ito's version. There's a couple of things that in this that are curtailed in favor of you kind of perceiving what might have happened yourself, whereas there's things that happen in this, sexual things, sexually violent things, that are much more on the nose, and look, this is the stark reality of the situation. You know, here it is presented in all its horrifying, you know, realness, whereas it's a little bit more tame in this, which, so I like both of them for different reasons, but artistically and aesthetically, I preferred Ito's version than the Furuya version. But yeah, no, I was really glad that I finally read this. It's something that I can finally tick off, and I'm glad that I pulled it out of my TBR jar. I may end up buying the original No Longer Human novel, as it's definitely something that I want to read. Especially considering it's somewhat of an autobiography of Osamu Dazai. And interestingly, in this, Osamu Dazai is an actual character in this, and the whole story is kind of framed by Dazai, whereas Dazai doesn't make any formal appearance in the Furuya version. So there are subtle differences between this and this. Sometimes it's just simple character names, or sometimes events play out differently between the Ito version and the Furuya version, particularly with two characters that go to the beach. I won't say anything more than that. It plays out differently in this, and I preferred this version of it than I did the Furuya version. I'm not going to spoil anything, obviously, because many of you have most likely just simply read the Ito version. Maybe, I don't know. I know both versions are. Well, this version is more sought after, I know, but I don't know how many people at this stage have read it. But anyway, I may talk about this in a separate video once I've read the original novel, whenever that may be, just so I can do a comparison of them both to the original source material. So yeah, that's No Longer Human by Junji Ito and Osamu Furuya. So let's move on to the next thing that I read for this month. The next thing that came off of my TBR was another Junji Ito title, Tomie. This is probably the thickest Junji Ito volume in my collection, actually. I think this clocks in roughly, it's over 700 pages. It's 742, so nearly 7,500 pages. So it is one of the longest, if not the longest, Junji Ito work that I have. It's longer than Uzumaki for sure. Maybe I can't remember how long No Longer Human was, but I'm pretty sure this is the thickest boy in my Junji Ito collection. And I enjoyed it. It was good. This was a strange one for me because you get to see Junji Ito's art style change drastically from its beginning up to its end, because this was originally serialized between on and off from like 1988 to 2000, so it's got like a good 12-year serialized run, and the artwork in the first chapter particularly, you can really see that he was very much a rookie and very new to serialization. I'll try to give you an example of just how shaky and sketchy his artwork is, because it's just not as detailed as his later works. I mean, you can kind of just get a sense of it there just from the crowd. But yeah, his early artwork is it's not bad. It's just very shaky. It actually kind of reminded me of Taiyo Matsumoto, because there's no real variation in the line thickness. Where artists, they use, like, manga artists generally use G pens, and things that are like in the foreground, there'll be like a thicker line quality, and things that are in the background will have a thinner line quality. There's just no line variation in this at all, which makes it look like it's been drawn with like a felt tip or something. But I do kind of like the sketchy sort of amateurist look about it, because you really get to see. You would look at this page there. I don't know if you can see it, but the character there who's got a knife in his hand, it just looks so abstract. You would see that by itself and you would never assume that it's Junji Ito. And that's what I kind of liked about it. I'll show it again just in case. So it's the one in the corner there. It just looks really, really, really amateurish. But it's fine, because it really is just that first chapter. The rest of the stories in this are, for the most part, very, very detailed, and very much of Ito's characteristic style. Very detailed, very gory. it it was just good. I enjoyed it. It wasn't amazing. It was nothing, it didn't blow me away. I wasn't really creeped out with this as I was with like Gyo and Uzumaki and his other short story collections. And ultimately, what it's about, it centers around this character who you can see on the front cover there, who is called Tomie, and she's some kind of supernatural entity. We assume her to be a succubus. It's not really ever defined exactly what she is, but her characteristics and the powers that she has would strongly suggest that she's a succubus, because she can make any man fall for her. Just this insatiable lust falls over men, and she can essentially control them to do anything that she wants them to do. She's a horrible, bratty, bitchy girl. Really superficial and obsessed with expensive jewelry and clothing and stuff like that. And it's just short stories of ways in which she manages to get men to do really horrible things in her name. And as it says in the back of the book, the victim is more often than not Tomie herself, because the men that she controls become so obsessed with her that they get this insatiable urge to end up killing her and chop her up into bits. But she just keeps coming back. Like you chop off her arm and she'll like a new Tomie will sprout out of that chopped off limb, kind of like a parasite or like some kind of worm or something. It's really, really creepy. There's a chapter in it where there's a guy who's literally pounding her into mulch, like she's just pounded into jelly, and the mulch keeps growing, because obviously the little microscopic Tomie's are just like sprouting out of this mulch. So he keeps mulching it, and he's basically ended up having to put all this Tomie meat in just barrels, and he's trying to find a way to dispose of it because it's just growing. It's pretty gross, and it's a pretty nice contrast between Tomie herself, who's very very aesthetically pleasing, very beautiful, as opposed to like all the horrible sickening things that happen to her, like she gets stabbed and just cut in half and decapitated and pounded to mulch, and it's just you see her like rotting and everything like that. Just typical of Junji Ito, really. So it's a nice contrast between her beauty and the sickening things that you see happen to her. But it never really seems to phase her, because she just comes back. She doesn't develop or find a way to escape the men that she controls from becoming too obsessive. It's almost like she just kind of accepts that it is what it is, and I don't think you follow the same Tomie throughout the different stories. I think there's probably multiple Tomies that you end up getting to follow, because they're kind of like parasites, and they're just kind of spread out. I don't want to obviously describe it too much, because I don't want to spoil anything, but ultimately it's a series of short stories. Some of the stories are or do have a longer narrative, which I did like. There's two stories where you get to kind of follow the same characters that are involved with Tomie in one way or another, which is quite interesting. There is actually one or two short stories in this that also feature in either Shiver or Smashed. It might be Shiver, and I think there's a Tomie story in Shiver, so that was interesting to read again. And I'm glad that there wasn't too much material in this that already existed in his other short stories, short story collections released by Viz. So that there was enough in this to warrant still owning this as a standalone volume. There's enough material in this that is fresh and new. But yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. Will I reread it again? Yeah, probably. I do really like Junji Ito. It's got many of his similar themes. Like obsession, murder, manipulation, all these sort of things that you commonly see in his other works. Supernatural kind of elements to it as well. Unexplained phenomena, all sorts of cool, pretty cool stuff. And as with any Junji Ito work, the kind of scenarios and things that happens to Tomie and the characters that are surrounding her are all really creative. That's one thing that I can never fault Junji Ito for, is even though some of his stories can be really goofy, he never. He just doesn't seem to run out of really creative ways to either kill or maim his characters. It's not just you run of the mill getting stabbed in the stomach and dying. There's some really twisted ways that people die in his stories, and Tomie is not really that much different for that. There's a certain chapter where they make sake out of Tomie's remains, and the sake like induces this sort of neurosis within the men who drink it. It's just bizarre and really goofy at the same time. Tomie was cool. I enjoyed it for what it was. Not my favorite Junji Ito work, admittedly, but a pretty cool read nonetheless. So let's move on to the next thing that I read for this month. So I finally finished and completed Felipe Smith's Pikachu. This very provocative cover here. For the longest time, I've only had 2 volumes, but I was very lucky to come across a good deal on the 3rd and most expensive volume right here. And the day that it came in, I just read it straight away, just so I could finish it, because I'd already read the first 2 volumes, and a week or so had passed by without reading the 3rd volume, and the 2nd volume ended with a big cliffhanger. So I'm really, really happy now to own this full set, but that's obviously a whole different discussion. I'll give you a very brief synopsis of Pikachu. So it's by a guy called Felipe Smith, who's an American-Argentinian author, who got commissioned by, I think it was, I don't know what publisher it was, maybe Kodansha. But basically, he went and lived over in Japan for a number of years, about just a little over 10 years ago. And I think he was commissioned specifically to write a series for them that was about cultural differences between young people in both America and Japan, and how they both view each other. So basically this series follows Milton. He's a young American kid on the front cover here, and he's absolutely obsessed with an anime series called Pikachu. Now he is you very, very much your quintessential otaku, ignorant, a little bit obnoxious in his views, but otherwise harmless. He's a good kid. He just doesn't really understand what Japan is as a whole, and he doesn't take into account the fact that Japan is, its own country, and not everybody there watches anime and reads manga. Not everybody cosplays. But that's what he assumes Japan is. He just thinks it's this mecca, this holy land of anime, and it's not. It has its districts like Akihabara, which is like the mecca of anime, but that's just a small part of a small neighborhood in Tokyo, right? So he wins a competition to go on a trip to Japan, and obviously his expectations are quickly cut down to size when he realizes that people don't even know what Pikachu is. Pikachu was a really shit anime that nobody watched in Japan, and his soul is crushed. So it kind of just explores that. And on the flip side, I guess you could say the secondary character is Reiko on the front cover here. She's actually my favorite character, and she gets the most character development. And she's a Japanese girl who learns to speak English. As you can see, obviously she's very attractive, very buxom, very curvy. And she, from the start, she really likes cosplaying. But when she goes for her first cosplay session, like photo session, obviously the photographers and producers are like, actually, you're really beautiful. Would like you to do some bikini modeling, and then it's just that. So she gets obviously this natural disdain for men, and when she meets Milton, they kind of meet somehow via a mutual friend called Miki. she's kind of disgusted by him and the other guy that Milton's with. So it's got a really good cast of secondary characters. I'm not going to tell you too much about the story because I would like to do a review on this, but I really, 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 really enjoyed this. It's something I've heard about for years and years and years and years. And Felipe Smith is pretty, he seems to really like interacting with his audience. So he sent me a thanks for reading it, and that was really, really nice. But yeah, Pikachu, volumes 1 to 3, really cool, crazy art style. Volume 1 is kind of still floating around for a reasonable price. I don't know if it's available digitally. If it is, I would highly recommend. Otherwise, if you can get a good deal on the volumes on eBay or something, then I highly recommend picking this up if the chance arises, because it's a really good series. And I would say it's if you're a die-hard non-Japanese otaku, I would say give this a read, because it's a pretty good guide for those kind of people who watch anime to learn Japanese. Complete weeaboos who just think that Japan is this, anime mecca, and everybody watches anime and everybody talks to like this, like it's an anime, and it's like, no, that's just offensive. It's a country with a rich, diverse history, just like everywhere else, So, yeah, it's an awesome series, really, really awesome series. I really enjoyed it. The last thing I read for this month was the last Leiji Matsumoto series that I own, and that was Queen Emeraldus, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And I have to say I really enjoyed this most out of the 3 Leiji Matsumoto series that I've read, those being Captain Harlock and Space Battleship Yamato. And this, from what I understand, is set before Captain Harlock. I really, really enjoyed it. Emeraldus is a really, there's lots of similarities between her and Harlock, in that she really likes saying her own name, and I think maybe that's just a trope of Leiji Matsumoto. There's this really kind of romantic, poetic vibe in the way the story is told. Lots of kind of like narration and an introspective thought. But it was entertaining, a lot more entertaining than his other series for me. I may end up doing an individual review for this, and they do come with these absolutely gorgeous volumes, which, despite how thin they are actually omnibuses. So the both volumes are 2-in-1. So this is a 4-volume series in total. But despite how thin it is, there isn't any compromise on the actual quality of the pages. You still get like really high kind of deep, rich blacks and line work, and the pages are really nice and glossy. The artwork is, as you would expect from Leiji Matsumoto, just absolutely stunning. I would recommend Leiji Matsumoto's manga just for the artwork alone. Even the back there, you can see he's another trope of Leiji Matsumoto that I've picked up on is he loves dials. Like, he just incorporates dials and like little kind of doohickey sort of mechanism sort of things in all of his ship designs that he's got real hard on for drawing dials. Dials, and also like there's this kind of like pirate aesthetic to it. Obviously, she's like a space pirate anyway, but it's like this really nice kind of amalgamation of different genres, i.e. historical pirates in space, but with like a very clear pirate design aesthetic. I mean, Queen Emeraldus herself, her ship is called the Queen Emeraldus, and it's basically this blimp with a pirate ship underneath it. Let me see if I can get like a picture of it. It doesn't, compared to like the Arcadia and the Space Battleship Yamato, it doesn't even look like a spacefaring vessel. It literally is just a blimp with a pirate ship underneath it. If I can get an image of it somewhere. So you can kind of see it there. It's literally just a bloody blimp. So that was the most kind of non-spacey looking kind of, I don't know, like non-futuristic looking ship that I've seen in his work so far. But even still, even though I didn't really like his other series, and I thought this one was a lot better. If any more of Leiji Matsumoto's work was ever released in English, I would definitely pick it up. I'm aware Galaxy Express 999 was released in English about 20 years ago or something like that, and it's long out of print now. So if that was ever re-released, I'd buy that in a heartbeat, just for the artwork alone. And it's been a good month. I think I've read some pretty cool stuff. I'm trying to cut down the length of these videos because they end up kind of coming to like 45 minutes and an hour. So I want to talk about series less, just so I can kind of focus on like my reviews. But anyway, I'm rambling. I hope you enjoyed the video. As you can see, I'm recording these over several days and weeks, so my appearance is probably changing somewhat, and obviously my clothes are different from the last clip that you saw. So obviously I'm not recording all these in one fell swoop, because boy, that was tiring. I don't know how people do it. Do these wrap up videos for so long, talk for like an hour or two. I get tired. Anyway, that was my wrap up for March 2021. If you've read any of these series, let me know. And drop a like. Let me know what you've been reading. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. One thing I always forget to plug is my Twitter. I am available on Twitter if you want to hit me up and send me a message or whatever about things that you're reading. I'm open to conversation. It's nice communicating with people. So thanks for watching.